And it was at that age, poetry arrived in search of me. I don't know where it came from winter or a river. I don't know how or when. No, they were not voices. They were not words, no silence. But from a street I was summoned, abruptly from the others. There I was, without a face, and it touched me. I did not know what to say. My mouth had no way with names. My eyes were blind, and something started in my soul. And I made my own way, deciphering with fire. And I wrote my first faint line. I wheeled with the stars. My heart broke loose on the wind.
Now here is a poem that may tell you more about writing poetry than any number of tomes on the art of writing poetry. Each line gives you an insight into the poetic process. Let me repeat. I don't know where it came from winter or a river. Don't you think it's this kind of subliminal linkage between what teases the mind into thinking, renouncing logical controls altogether? For instance, you may ask, how does poetry come from winter or a river? I don't have an answer for you. Nor do I think would Pablo Neruda himself be able to give you an answer.
But let's keep moving. Whenever poetry happened to the poet, it didn't come to him as voices or words or even silence. And if it came to him from a street, it only implies that poetry must not divorce itself from the common man's experience. There must be some social relevance. Your subject may be a woman laborer toiling in the sun, a bus conductor, vegetable seller, all hailing from the streets. But the point to remember, taking one's cue from this poem, is that the origin of a poem may be indeterminate. It may come from anywhere, nowhere. A poem, you must have felt, is basically an utterance. Whether it be in the first person or the third, there is the voice of the speaker behind it. You cannot mistake it, whether it be that of the poet or an imaginary character, a person. And the voice may communicate in words which are loud, gentle, abrasive, sensuous, or ironic. If you don't hear the voice, the poem will never communicate anything. It's like a reader who is both deaf and blind. Let us examine, let us explore some of the better known poets. See how the poet has employed the voice to project a particular vision. We'll begin with still another view of grace by A.K. Ramanujan, the well-known Indian poet. In this case, the voice is that of the poet, direct, intense, ending finally on a note, stringent note, of irony.
I burned and burned, But one day I turned and caught that thought by the screams of her hair, and said, beware, do not follow a gentleman's morals with that absurd, determined air. Find a priest. Find any beast in the wind for a husband. He will give you a house full of legitimate sons. It is too late for sin, even for treason. And I have no reason to know your kind. Bred Brahmin among the singers of shivering hymns, I shudder to the bone at hungers that roam the street beyond the constable's beat. But there she stood, upon that dusty road on a high-lit April mind, and gave me a look. Commandments crumbled in my father's past, her tumbled hair suddenly known as silk in my angry hand. I shook a little and took her behind the laws of my land.
From first-person voice, let's now move to another kind of voice poets often use. They can speak the language of symbols and images. William Blake, the early 19th century mystic poet, in his poem The Tiger, symbolizes the human concept of divine perfection in the physical body of the tiger. The imagery builds up the sensory experience of fire in the eyes of the tiger, sinew of the heart, the dread feet and dread hand of the beast. Listen to the first three stanzas for yourself.
Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burns the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder, and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand, and what dread feet?
In some cases, the poet's voice may be an abstract statement on life, presented in the third person. In other words, it's not a lyrical expression to articulate an emotion felt or realized by the poet in his personal life. Let's take, for instance, this poem by W.H. Auden, Doom is Dark, in which he speaks impersonally of the universal experience of doom, which may befall any human being, anywhere, anytime.
Doom is dark, and deeper than any sea dingle. Upon what man it fall in spring, day wishing, flowers appearing, avalanche sliding, white snow from rock face, that he should leave his house. No cloud soft hand can hold him, restrained by women, but ever that man goes, through place keepers, through forest trees, a stranger to strangers over undried sea, houses for fishes, suffocating water, or lonely unfellas chat by potholed becks, a bird, stone haunting, an unquiet bird.
You will notice that although the poet talks of a man leaving his house, it's not any particular person, but any man, anywhere, who can face any kind of conflict in any context. The sense of impersonal and universal, which the poet creates very successfully, is brought about by the use of symbol and metaphor. For instance, Auden visualizes doom, which is an abstraction, as a presence, dark and deep, darker and deeper than any sea dingle. Basically, a poem is an utterance in the poet's own voice, but it may evoke in the mind of the reader multiple voices, a sensation of many voices, as though he were hearing the voice on different wavelengths. Listen to this beautiful poem by Denis Levertov. It is called What Were They Like?
Did the people of Vietnam use lanterns of stone?
So their light hearts turned to stone. It is not remembered whether in gardens stone lanterns illumined pleasant ways.
Did they hold ceremonies to reverence the opening of buds?
Perhaps they gathered once to delight in blossom. But after the children were killed, there were no more buds.
Were they inclined to rippling laughter?
So laughter is bitter to the burned mouth.
Did they use bone and ivory, jade and silver for ornament?
A dream ago, perhaps. Ornament is for joy. All the bones are charred.
Had they an epic poem?
It is not remembered. Remember, most were peasants. Their life was in rice and bamboo. When peaceful clouds were reflected in the paddies, and the water buffalo stepped surely along terraces, maybe fathers told their sons old tales. When bombs smashed the mirrors, there was time only to scream.
Did they distinguish between speech and singing?
There is an echo yet, it is said, of their speech, which was like a song. It is reported their singing resembled the flight of moths in the moonlight. Who can say? It is silent now.
By using multiple voices in the question-answer mode, the poetess built up a vivid picture of war-destroyed Vietnam, destroyed physically, mentally, spiritually, and culturally. Finally, the voice can also be evoked by rhythm and language. Take this poem by Dylan Thomas, The Force That Threw the Green Fuse.
The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer, and I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent with the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mountain streams turns mine to wax, and I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks.
Undoubtedly, the poem is rather tough to understand, but even such a poem can work its way to the reader through what is called the music of words. One can almost hear the tingling sound of the words, the breathing of the poet behind the recital. But then Dylan Thomas is still remembered as one of the greatest reciters of poetry in recent times. So while you're dreaming up your poem, think of the voice that you hear in your mind, and remember to humanize your perceptions by the use of personae or speaking voices. Let these voices be an effective medium between the poet and the reader.
Whatever may be said to be the strength of a poem,
be it its symbolism, intense emotion, language, rhythm. It must have a sense of structural design. Not in the sense of beginning, middle, end, but a reader must be given a sense of progression, both internally and externally. For instance, the traditional poets lent their verse to such rigid forms as the ballad, ode, sonnet, elegy. The modern poet achieves a sense of structure through a subtle organization of his material. As far as the internal design of a poem is concerned, let's do some loud thinking about nature poetry. Some people tend to think that it's easy to turn out a poem about an object of nature. A cloud, a flower, a mountain, a river. Let me caution you, it is perhaps the most difficult form of poetry to put across to the reader. For a nature poem to come alive, it is necessary for the poet to be on very intimate terms with his subject. A sort of emotional, even a spiritual communion. You should feel that nature is trying to share her very intimate thoughts and feelings with you. At this point, let me quote two very beautiful lines by William Wordsworth. The meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that often lie too deep for tears. We have no time to go deep into these two lines. But have you noticed that the flower referred to is not the rose or the lily, but the meanest, the lowliest? And the emotion it evokes is not the usual romantic ecstasy, but a moment to think, even if such thoughts lead to a poignant, tearful understanding of life. However, nature can mean different things for different people, ranging from it being a divine force to a hostile agent. How would you respond to the following excerpts from The Open Sea by William Meredith? We say the sea is lonely. Better say ourselves are lonesome creatures, whom the sea gives neither yes nor no for company. Oh, there are people all right settled in the sea. It is as populous as Maine today, but no one who will give you the time of day. They are speechless. And the famous noise of sea, which a poet has beautifully told us in our day, is hardly a sound to speak comfort to the lonely. When I'm not yet a man given to prayer, I pray for each creature lost since the start at sea, and give thanks it was not I, nor yet one close to me. There is one of the enchantment of the sea for Meredith, you will notice. He perceives under the surface glamour only those who drowned at sea. There is about as much companionship of the sea as a walk through a graveyard. The poem leaves one aghast at the vision of the sea as a graveyard, both literally and figuratively. A nature poem does not merely describe objects. A poet must get within an object in order to realize its identity. And the expansiveness of nature affords us rare insights into the condition of one's being. As Robert Frost found, walking by a snowy field one evening, it goes, "Snow falling and night falling fast, oh fast. In a field I looked into going past,
and the ground almost covered smooth and snow, but a few weeds and stubble showing last. The woods around it have it, it is theirs. All animals are smothered in their lairs. I am too absent-spirited to count. The loneliness includes me unawares. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. You will notice that the strength of this poem does not lie in the description of the snow, the description of the woods, the fields, of the animals, but in the intense feeling of loneliness it evokes in the poet's mind. One can almost see the poet turn round in the last two lines to himself impulsively and wonder about his capacity to bear loneliness. I have it in me so much nearer home. Why should he feel frightened of the loneliness between the stars, up in the sky?
So when you're writing nature poetry, remember to pay special attention to details, relate your poem to some human emotion, use simple and direct expressions, create metaphors and similes within the realm of nature, infuse emotion in your poem. Do you remember the lines I shared with you at the beginning from that beautiful poem by Pablo Neruda? And do you recall that poetry came to him from the streets, not from some lonely tower or rose garden? Life unfolds itself in the streets in all its gruesome reality. Social injustice, hunger, corruption, exploitation, racism, violence and war. Can a poet withdraw himself from such reality into a lonely tower? Can one agree with an escapist poet like William Morris, who said, "Dreamer of dreams born out of my own due time, why should I try to set the crooked straight?"
So there is a school of thought according to which a poet must relate his work to social problems. He must lend his voice into provoking his contemporaries to realize the need for social awakening. This then is the genesis of sociological poetry. No wonder that there have been poets who have participated in social and political movements, emotionally, imaginatively, and fearlessly. One such poet was Pablo Neruda. Listen to this poem of his. I'm explaining a few things.
You're going to ask, and where are the lilacs, and the poppy petal metaphysics, and the rain repeatedly spattering its words and drilling them full of apertures? I lived in a suburb of Madrid, and one morning, all that was boiling, one morning the bonfire leapt out of the earth, devouring human beings, and from then on, fire, gunpowder from then on, and from there on, blood. Face to face with you I have seen the blood of Spain, tar like a tide to drown you in one wave of prides and knives. Treacherous generals, see my dead houses, look at broken Spain, and you ask me, why doesn't his poetry speak of dreams and leaves? Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. Come, see the blood in the streets.
Oh boy, one can almost feel the words reek with blood, seeing the killings all over. Oh,
It's such a visual impact. The reader feels his heart is pounding, seeing the blood all around him. Now here is a poem. It's Nation Time by the Negro poet of America, Amiri Baraka. His images, his language and rhythm breathe fire against racial prejudice.
Time to get together. Time to become one strong, fast black energy space. One pulsating positive magnetism. Rising. Time to get up and become. Become. Time to become. Time to get up and become. Black genius, rising spirit muscle. Sunman, get up, rise, heart of universe is to be. Future of the world, the black man is the future of the world. Become, rise up. Future of the black genius spirit, reality. Move from crossroads back, from dead snake head, from wig funeral in slow motion, from dancing teeth and coward tip, from jibber jabber patney smidge patney boss. When the brothers strike, come out niggers, niggers come out. When the brothers take over the school, help niggers. All niggers, Negroes must change. Come together in unity and unify. For one nation, it's nation time.
Spike Milligan, with a completely different way of writing, which is at once prosaic and poetic, has a tongue-in-cheek flavor about his poems. For instance, he says, "They chopped down 100-foot trees to make chairs. I bought one. I am 6 feet 1 inch when I sit. In the chair I am 4 feet 2. Did they really chop down 100-foot tree to make me look shorter?" The sociological concerns of the poet today range from war to ecological destruction. But whenever you are writing about something for which you feel intensely, remember, do not lapse into cheap rhetoric. Choose to write on a theme you feel intensely involved with, and infuse authenticity and emotion in your poems.
All said and done, there comes up the fundamental question. What is it that moves the human heart so deeply, poignantly, almost compulsively? It's surely love. The poignant emotion of separation, the rapturous savoring of union. Even mystical poetry, which feigns to use romantic imagery, derives its strength essentially from the emotion of love. So it's love. Love of woman, love of man, love of God, that has inspired the poets through the ages. This explains the supremacy of romantic poetry over other forms. A romantic poem then breaks into many tints, into a variety of themes. Nostalgia for the past, visions for the future, ache of loneliness, awe and fear of the unknown. Take, for instance, this excerpt from Shiv K. Kumar's Broken Columns, which evokes the poet's childhood, his youth, his middle age. As a young student at Cambridge, he recalls his brown idols, multi-limbed like giant wasps, manacled with his sacred thread, gods like wily seducers, goddesses with phony breasts and thighs, incarnating Mother India. The letter home to mother still breeds nostalgia. Do the mauve bougainvilleas over the rear gate still bite into the Ashoka tree? And I pray your coconut water offerings to the Hanuman temple will lubricate father's gout. For a change, let's turn to the refreshing voice of a woman whose uncompromising candour, articulated through sanguine imagery, strikes another romantic note, which is closer to anger, to pain, than to love and belonging. Here is a poem by Kamala Das, The Old Playhouse.
You planned to tame a swallow, to hold her in the long summer of your love, so that she would forget also her nature, the urge to fly, and the endless pathways of the sky. It was not to gather knowledge of yet another man that I came to you, but to learn what I was, and by learning to learn to grow. But every lesson you gave me was about yourself. You were pleased with my body's responses, its weather, its shallow convulsions. You dribbled spittle into my mouth. You embalmed my lust with your bittersweet juice. You called me wife. I was taught to break saccharin into your tea and to offer at the right moment the vitamins. Covering beneath your monstrous ego, I ate the magic loaf and became a dwarf. I lost my will and reason. To all your questions I mumbled incoherent replies. The summer begins to pour. No more singing, no more a dance. My mind is an old playhouse.
Speaking of passionate poetry, there is an accent in modern verse on physical love. No longer does the poet love an idea of his beloved. She is no longer a phantom of delight and so on. But the beloved is loved with all his, her faults and weaknesses. No longer is he or she considered divine. Haven't we travelled through a vast area of poetry in its diverse forms and themes? A poet is a person who cannot create unless he feels totally free to let his imagination, to quote John Keats, fly wherever it listeth. The same poet may write on a variety of subjects. In a romantic state of mind, he may write a poem with an emotional content. Socially provoked, he may turn up a revolutionary piece. And since every poet is gifted with a very strong visual imagination, he may write about a river, a flower. Of course, what makes a poem truly successful is the close approximation between its theme and structure, between its feeling and thought, between its image and idea. You may have felt overwhelmed with all the information that we've shared with you, but don't be overawed by it. If you have the capacity to feel, to see, to hear, there is no reason why you should not be able to turn out a good poem. So get started with the writing of it, and don't feel discouraged if you have to try again and again.